Hello, I'm Paul Turner. I'm here with Captain Harold DeMarrero, the only Commodore ever for the Delta Queen lines. He's got a lot of good stories to tell, and I wanted to share them with you. So there ain't no sense of starting anywhere but the beginning. So, Captain, let's have at it, buddy. What do you want to share with us?
I'd like to start off by telling a story about, it's a true story, about the first time I was ever a pilot on Mississippi. It all started back, my grandfather was the one who trained me to be a pilot. I used to work for him when I was a kid. And the second year that, I was actually 14 years old, and I had been a pilot, not a pilot, but a deckhand for a couple of years. And this year I got to be a mate on one of my great uncle's boats. So we started out on a boat leaving Memphis. It was going up the Mississippi, and it was the boat was the William T. Warner, and it was named after my great uncle William Warner. And we got on board that night and started to go up the Mississippi. And we only had about 6 empty barges. The captain was a young guy, he was only about 19 years old. His name was Russell Murphy. And the pilot, I don't remember his whole name, but we called him Red. He was the pilot. And we got all crewed up in Memphis, got ready to go, got all our supplies on and everything. We got the barges in tow and started to go up the Mississippi. We was going up to Caruthersville, Missouri. And I just had laid down after we had all the barges and everything together, and I was going to sleep. And I heard the pilot, Red, him and his wife was arguing. His wife was the cook on the boat, and they were having a terrible fight outside of my room. And I just figured he was drunk, and so they argued, and then I finally fell over to sleep. And about 30 or 40 minutes after I was asleep, they woke me up and they says, "Get up." I says, what's the matter? He says, "Well, we can't find Red, the pilot." And I says, "Well, who's steering the boat?" "Well, Vandergrift, the chief engineer, was running the boat. Red called him upstairs. He was driving the boat, and he went downstairs with his wife, and he's missing." So anyway, we looked all over the boat, couldn't find Red anywhere, and then we tied our barges off, went up and down the river. We went down the river about 10 or 12 or 13 miles and looking for Red, and we couldn't find any semblance of him in the water or anything. And so then we came back to the dock, and of course the Coast Guard was down and investigating what was happening, and his wife was like hysterical, and they took her off the boat, his wife, and the best thing I figured was that she probably thrown his ass overboard. And to this day, he's never been found. But after we got back, we took the boat back to the dock and talked to the Coast Guard, and my grandfather was there talking with my great uncle and Russell Murphy, who was the captain on the boat, the young captain. And Russell said, "Well, what am I going to do for a pilot?" And my uncle said, great uncle said, "Well, use Harold Jr. He can stand a watch for you." So he came over and told me, he said, "Well, you're going to be my relief." We got on board the boat, went back, hooked up our barges, started going up the Mississippi and out of Memphis, and then Russell called me up there and says, okay, you steer for a while, and if you need me, just blow the whistle and somebody will wake me up. So anyway, we'd all been up for like 24 hours. So I started up the Mississippi, and I worked about a couple hours, and then I said, you know, I don't really know where I'm going. It was night, and so I blew the whistle. Well, nobody came, and I blew the whistle. Nobody came, and I blew the whistle all night long, and nobody came. And so about 10 o'clock the next morning, the Captain Russell, he came up and he says, hey man, you're doing good. He says, and I was up above a really bad turn on the Mississippi called Randolph Bluff. He said, I see you're above Randolph Bluff. I said, I guess. And he says, well, did you check for traffic on the radio before you come around Randolph Bluff? And I says, where's Randolph Bluff? And he said, just forget it. So anyway, I stood a pilot watch for the next 2 days going up to Crothersville, and that was my first experience as a pilot at 14 years old on the Mississippi.
Okay, how about, I think one of the most interesting stories I ever heard you talk about was one of my favorite songs growing up was Proud Mary. And Proud Mary has an affiliation with your family. Could you explain that?
Oh yeah, Proud Mary? Sure I can. Proud Mary was written by a deckhand. I don't remember his name, but he was a deckhand on the Mary Elizabeth, which was named after my grandmother. It was a boat that my grandfather owned. Actually, it was a pretty famous boat because it was the Mary Elizabeth had originally been a prison boat out of New York, and my grandfather bought her from them, and he never changed anything. He just the chains were still down in lower decks where they used to chain the prisoners, but the Mary Elizabeth. This guy wrote the song Proud Mary, and the boat was the Mary Elizabeth, named after my grandmother.
Okay, Captain, got another minute or so. You want to tell people some of your what the things you've done on the river, some of the jobs you've held?
Well, I've done just about everything you could do on the Mississippi. I was started off as a deckhand at age 12, and again at 13 and 14 I was started out being a pilot. By the time I was 16, I was going to school and working nights running a tug in the Memphis Harbor. And after that, I ended up getting married. I don't want to talk about that.
Okay, we'll leave all those marriages and stuff for another time. Okay, thanks, Captain. This is the end of the first edition of our River Stories, or whatever we're going to call it. And thank you very much, and hope people enjoy it and come back and watch some more.